So we have 7 committee members. So why don't we get started and then we can move into the agenda. So why don't we start with introductions and I will start with you, Pat.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Pat Kimball. I am the current chair of the Maine Recovery Council. Welcome.
Todd.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Todd Brackett. I'm the sheriff in Lincoln County.
Great. Liz.
Hi, Liz Blackwell Moore, she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Public Health for Cumberland County Public Health.
Excellent. Mary.
Hello, all. I'm Mary Coyne. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Recovery Council.
Great. Bruce.
Hello, my name's Bruce Naughton with the Maine Reentry Network, person in long-term recovery and person who lives with mental health challenges.
Thank you, Bruce. Katrina.
Hi, I'm Katrina Bonish, and I am with the Attorney General's office and not a member of the council.
Thank you, Katrina. Grayson.
Hi, my name is Grayson. I am also with the Attorney General's office and also not a part of the council.
Thanks. Tess.
Hey everyone, I'm Tess Parks. I am the policy director for Maine Recovery Action Project. I'm not on the grants and programs committee, but I'm, here to participate and listen and learn.
Thanks, Tess. Chastity.
Hi, everyone, Chastity Toole, she, her pronouns, and a harm reduction consultant in Washington County. I'll keep my camera off while I do notes.
Thank you, Chastity. Maggie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maggie McLaughlin. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services for the City of Portland. I use she, her pronouns. I am a member of the Maine Recovery Council as a litigating subdivision representative. I am not officially a member of this committee, but join in to participate when I can.
Awesome. Great. And I'm Joe Everett, the president and CEO of the Opportunity Alliance here in South Portland, and I'm a member of the council and I chair the Program and Grants Committee. So good to see everyone. And Mary, I probably should just hand it right over to you for the next bit. So I know we're going to talk a little about the uh, low barrier shelters, I think is first up.
Yes. So thank you, Joe, first of all. At our last Program and Grants Committee meeting, we had discussed the low barrier shelter applications, which is most of you will remember we had tabled back in November after the council decided we needed a little bit more information about how the organizations were working together, and also they were in a point of transition of who was taking ownership over certain aspects of their operation. And so we waited until the new year and the new council convened to make a final decision. What I did is I reached out to Preble Street after that last committee meeting and asked a couple questions to clarify sort of those missing links or pieces of information that the council had identified as wanting a little bit more clarity on before a final decision was made. I had shared with the committee the responses that we received from Preble Street, and so I would love to make sure everyone not only received those, but if we have any additional questions, now would be the time for us to discuss that. I do know we have folks from Preble Street and Hope House who are on the meeting today, and they have offered to answer any questions as needed so that we can move forward with a recommendation to the full council. I'll see if I can pull, would it be helpful if I pulled those up? Okay. Just give me one moment. All right. I just pulled these from the email that was shared with you all. Sorry that the formatting is all wonky. Essentially, there have been no changes to the project activities or scope of work since we reviewed the Hope House and the Preble Street grant applications. As many of you will remember, both of those applications referenced the change in operations and also how they plan to move forward. So a lot of the information we had in advance. But again, the intention here was just to clarify any of those gaps or missing pieces of information. When asked if they anticipated any changes to the operations or programming, they did not mention anything significant. They will continue to operate as the low barrier shelter that they're currently operating as. They have made some minor, program improvements, they noted, but otherwise had nothing here to report. In terms of additional funding and specifically around other settlement funds, Hope House, Aleda's Way, and Florence House have received some settlement funds from the Attorney General's office. And then again, just reiterating the critical need for the council's funds. They were able to, remind us about how the council's funding will allow them to keep their operations going and to keep their doors open to make sure that they're providing not only the staffing support that's needed, but also all of the other supplies and materials that required to keep these low barrier shelters doing the work that they are doing. Those are the questions we received, so I'll open it back up to the council now for any questions, clarification. And Joe, I'll turn it over to you for facilitation.
Pat.
So Mary, just as a reminder, these are two programs, right?
Correct. Yep.
And they received high scores. And the total amount each one was requesting. Could you remind us what that was?
Yes. We had, sorry, I've got so many tabs going here. I think it was just over $1 million total for these two. And when I had
So it's 500,000 apiece.
approximately,
Okay.
I believe one is about 601. Just give me a sec. Also, I'm receiving some calls from Gordon right now. Does anyone know if he's on the public link?
Gordon's not on the public link that I see.
I don't think I've heard from Gordon. Let me check.
He said he can't find the link. Please have it resent.
I'll send it to him now.
Thank you.
Sorry. Let's see. Hope House is requesting $478,632 dollars, and then Preble Street's funding request is $683,760. And I can share this with you all, which we talked about last time we met. This is Hope House, and that is Preble Street. Also included their funding tier for a bit of additional context as well.
And again, it may be just my memory. I don't know. My memory was that the only reason was we had some questions and concerns about where the funding was going, and we knew that there was sufficient evidence about Hope House being acquired by Preble Street and so we just put it aside to discuss later. I can share, and it's just my opinion only. I think that they scored high, their grants were well written, there is a need, and for me, I would support allocating the funds to those two shelters, low barrier shelters. But that's just from my research.
That was my recollection too, and I concur with Pat.
Were there any concerns from other members of the council?
I would hope that Gordon could be part of this too, because he did have some questions at the time, and hopefully he's going to get on here.
Yeah, I too am in support, and I know we've been talking for over a year about this, and I know we've had Greg, I think I missed the meeting, but Greg Payne came to a council meeting to talk about the reality of funding for the group.
Joe,
Yep.
check the chat. There's a question that came in from Chastity as chair you probably want to respond to.
Oops.
Joe, I can also jump in while we're waiting for Gordon. Folks who are on the call to ask questions about the grant contracts and the standard contract template that was sent around, thank you for being here. We will be answering questions. We have just a couple agenda items we have to get through first. And Katrina can provide a brief overview of how we'll invite you to chime in. So while we wait, Katrina, would you mind just letting folks know how that process will work from a logistic
Absolutely.
standpoint? Thank you.
So once we get to the point where we are inviting the public to go ahead and ask their questions, I'll ask you to raise your little Zoom hand and I will pull you over one by one. You'll ask your questions, and then once you are done asking your questions, if no one on the council has any further questions, I will then put you back to the public side and we'll move on to the next person. So when I send that invite for you to come over as a panelist, please accept that. Otherwise, it will slow us down.
So just a point of clarity, are we talking about guests from Preble Street? And is that more around information sharing and questions from the council, Mary?
For both. We do have Preble Street folks here, so if we have questions, if the council has direct questions for them, we'll do the same process of, we'll address them, they'll raise their hand. Katrina will add them as a panelist, and I've let her know some folks who are here from Preble Street. And then we'll also do a similar process when we get into the contract discussions.
Great. So we'll advance all the sort of Preble Street folks. Yeah, Katrina,
Yep.
is that? Yeah, okay.
Mary, do you want those?
Okay, go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I think my recollection of the conversation was that we just had some questions. We all were really in support of the work that they were doing and in support of supporting them, that it's a huge need and it's a need that just requires funding to do this really hard work. And I think we just had some questions about, because there were these switchovers and there was some, it wasn't totally clear in the applications what would be. So I think we set them aside to for sure fund them. Like my understanding was people were very interested. It was like, let's get through these other ones that we're doing because we were trying to get through so many at the time. But my understanding was everybody was really in support of doing it, of supporting them with some of our questions answered. So I think we're here now. I mean, if Gordon has questions, other thoughts, fine. I think there's many of us on here that also feel like we were there and understand what happened. And are we voting here or are we voting in the council meeting? I guess I didn't totally understand that part.
I think we can only recommend Liz, and then the full council would have to go forward.
Yeah, Liz, as far as I remember, the last sort of official vote by the council was to continue these discussions with the Program and Grants Committee. So a recommendation can now move from the Program and Grants Committee to the full council about how to move forward.
Great. Do we have a quorum? Can I make a motion to move to accept the proposals and recommend them for funding at the full council?
Do we want to have Preble Street join first before, or does it, what protocol, Mary?
If there are additional questions that we would like to ask them, I think that would be great. They've been very patient with us as we've navigated this and gone back and forth with them. So I do think if we have questions, now is the time. I also think it'd be wonderful to just hear from them briefly about their project and again, why this is so important. And then we can formally move on and go from there.
Yeah, if we're just going to hear from them, I think we should keep moving with Liz's motion, and then we can vote and then have them on. Then they'll know the good news or the somewhat good news. So keep going, Liz. I didn't want to interrupt your momentum.
All right, so I made a motion. Anyone second my motion?
Second.
Okay. I guess now, Grayson, can you call the roll?
Bruce Naughton,
Yes.
Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Joe Everett,
Yes.
Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Todd Brackett.
Yes.
Thank you.
Grayson, I don't know if you saw it. Gordon still hasn't received the email, so I put his personal email in there.
I'll send it to there. I had been sending it to his maine.gov email, but I'll send it to that one instead and see if he gets it.
Thank you.
Welcome, Allie.
Thank you.
And hi, Mark.
Hey, Joe, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Great. So we'll give you guys the floor to give us a bit of an update on your projects, and you probably just watch the vote, so that's good.
Yeah, well, I learned a long time ago, once you have the votes, you just keep your mouth shut. So
I think you taught me that, Mark, a long time ago.
Good advice.
So I will be brief, and obviously I want to thank everybody. I really, really appreciate it. We are now in, I think, day 9 of running Hope House, and so far so good. But it's a heavy lift for us in many, many different ways, including the budget. So this is really, really great news. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Mark, I always love to tell this story. My father was an original founder on a board of men. There were men at the time. I don't think there's any women on the committee who opened Hope House.
Oh, really?
That's always had a sweet spot in my heart. Yeah.
Well, I've heard some history stories about the beginning of Hope House, and really, like probably all of the organizations we're involved in, it all started with people with big hearts and wanted to make a difference. And sitting around a kitchen table, they decided to actually take action. So
He
kudos
did.
for your dad. So that's great.
Well, and he loves to tell the story. He quit the board. It's my favorite part of the story. He quit the board when they started hiring professionals to come in.
Oh man. A different era for sure.
Yes, it was.
I'll just add, thank you so much. This is really important funding for these 136 shelter beds. So thank you, and thank you all for your work on this committee. This is a huge undertaking. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you to you both for joining us. Did the council have any curious questions for Allie and Mark? Or anything you ever wanted to know about Preble Street?
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Thanks, guys, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Okay, so Mary, we're going to now dive into contract conversations.
Yes, we had one more piece on the agenda around an urgent policy request that Gordon had put forth. I don't want to speak to that without him here. If he's still having trouble, we can move forward, but I do just want to note that as the other agenda item.
And we can come back to that. Good point.
Sounds great. Okay. Oh, 1 second. I also just received a message from him. He still has not received it. Okay, I will send that to Grayson. There's a Gmail account that he has asked us to send it to.
Bruce gave me that Gmail and I sent it twice, the panelist link to that email. Will you ask him to just try to join through the agenda and I can promote him?
Yeah, I'm doing that with him right now too.
Thank you
So
so much.
maybe we'll all hit
Thank
him
you.
at the same time.
Thank you, guys.
Sorry for the technical issues, everyone. Great. So I shared a survey link and the council's standard contract terms with all of our grantees last week. And also some additional context, was for the council to understand a little bit more about the status of each of your projects. I know many of you completed these applications in the early fall and a decision was made in November. And so while we weren't expecting any changes, we wanted to have that conversation with folks up front so that we could just keep those in mind, as we begin the contracting process. For also a couple of you, as you're well aware, the funding amount that was approved for your project was different than the one you had requested. And so in that survey, I'd asked for a little bit more information about how your project may have changed. And also, I know those folks are working on creating an updated budget and let me know about any changes to the scope of work, which was much appreciated. So thank you. As part of that survey, you all had an opportunity as well to ask any questions about the standard contract terms that were shared. As you all know, based on the email that I sent around, we've been working to develop those standard contract terms for the last couple of months. The council has autonomy to approve projects and decide how our funding is used. But we do have the Attorney General's office providing support to our work and also as a third party to our contracts. And so part of what we've been trying to do is really understand, what contract terms need to be included such that both the council and the Attorney General's office are comfortable moving forward with signing these contracts. And then from there, we as the council will be working with all of you to finalize those contracts. If we need to, again, kind of dive into the negotiation phase of the contracting process. But the intention right now is to kind of allow you all to ask any questions you may have up front. I'm sure that questions one of you may have is very similar to a question someone else may have. And so I really want to create this space for us to have a more informal but informational sort of session together where the council members, some of them, are here to also learn along with you. And if there are questions that I can't answer or our council members can't answer, I will certainly follow up with our legal counsel and get back to you all. I will note that our legal counsel is not present, so I will be taking lead on answering questions and appreciate in advance your patience because I am no lawyer, nor do I plan to be. So I've done my best to understand these contract terms in a way that my brain can wrap my head around and understand. And so hopefully I can convey some of that knowledge to you all so you feel more comfortable moving forward. Or again, if there are components of the standard contract terms you're not comfortable with, we can discuss that at a later date.
Great. Welcome, Gordon. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Gordon Smith. I'm the state's director of opioid response. I'm one of the members of the council. Sorry to be late getting in.
No worries, no worries. Good to see you. Okay, are we ready for questions, Mary? Are we ready to move into that mode?
Yes. What we're going to do is Grayson's offered to pull up the standard contract terms that were shared. So we'll start with that. And what I'll do is sort of quickly walk through the body of the contract actually, and then go through Rider B, which are more of the standard contract terms that may require sort of further explanation. So we'll break it into two segments. I'll review this first part and then open it up to questions, and then we'll move on to the Rider B, and I'll do the same and invite any questions from our grantees. All right.
And Mary, I have to step away from my screen for a couple of seconds. I'll be right back.
No worries. All right. I also have these printed, so thank you, Grayson, for pulling up the screen so I don't have to multitask here. All right. So we've developed this contract to sort of make this process as collaborative and I don't want to say easy, but as straightforward as possible for us, given that the council members have all volunteered to be involved in the drafting. With just one staff person and now 45 grant contracts, we're going to do everything in our power to get these completed and finalized for you all as soon as possible. And so part of our process in doing so was, again, creating this sort of standard grant template that we could all use moving forward. So the first section of this, the purpose, will be updated for each of your specific projects and your organization. This will also provide a pretty general overview of the votes that were taken by the council and also what our grant process was, like in general, just a pretty general overview. I'm working to develop that now, and so that will be fairly standard across all of your contracts. The background information will not be changed much. This just describes, the establishment of the council, why we have the right to give out money, and why we exist. Again, very standard language for us.
Good for you.
We'll also provide just a summary again of the decision-making process for these grant funds and how we determined the awards. Great, thanks. For the parties, again, pretty straightforward. You all as the grantee will provide us this information, which you have already. As a reminder, the Attorney General's office is the payer, technically, and then we as the Maine Recovery Council are the grantors.
I'm sorry, Mary, can I just ask, is it possible for you to show this on one screen? It's very, very tiny. You have it on like double, so we're seeing two, and maybe then make it a little bit bigger. Is that okay? Thank you. I can just see it much better.
Thank you to Grayson. Grayson has it pulled up.
Oh, thanks, Grayson.
Is that better?
Yes, for me it is. Thank you.
Wonderful. Again, all pretty standard. I won't get too much into this. The roles and responsibilities piece, section A, again, very straightforward. We'll just copy paste the provider's name. Nothing really will be adapted or changed much here. We'll provide a brief overview in section B of what your project funds are intended to support. Really just what's your scope of work? What is your project doing? Again, very standard general language there. As the council, we are the administrators of the contract. You'll see that term used a little bit more throughout the body of the contract here. And then once again in Rider B, the Attorney General's office as the payer is actually the one who are issuing the funds, which is part of why this process is a little bit more involved than it may be for other organizations, and part of why, again, we're walking through this process now with all of you to help you understand it to the best of our ability. Here, we'll just include the terms of the contract. For most of these grants, they are 2-year contracts, so we'll have the appropriate start date and end date included here. The standard contract terms for us include returning any unused funds 60 days after the end of your contracts. Wonderful. And this is all, again, pretty standard language. Rider A is the scope of work. That is the part of the contract that our council members will be supporting and working with me and with you all to develop. You have all provided us ample amount of information in your grant applications, and so that will be our starting place. And then as needed, we will be reaching out to all of you to clarify or provide additional context, again, where we see that it's needed. But all the deliverables, which is in my head a fancier version of just saying the purpose of the funds and the scope of work, those are all included in that Rider A, so we don't go into much detail here. Wonderful. And I also do want to call out number 4 there mentions our indirect cost policy. I know many of you reviewed this prior or while completing the grant application. So this won't be new, but just something to call out and remind you all. Over the next couple of weeks, I will be reviewing all of your budgets in a little bit more detail just to make sure the indirect cost policy aligns with the numbers you've provided us. And if I have any questions, I'll reach out. I don't anticipate any issues there, but just wanted to mention that it is included in the contract, and you all received a copy of that policy. I believe it was at the end of this packet that went out. So for the payment terms, I've communicated this with some of you, but not all of you. These contracts will be upfront payments. We will not be invoicing for a variety of reasons. One of them being we recognize that many organizations don't have the cash flow to do that and to do the work that you've outlined in your project without us providing the funding up front. It's also, in the name of grant funding to provide it to you all up front. After all the information you've given us, you've been awarded this money and trusted with it to do as you have outlined. And so, again, a majority of this will be provided up front. We will be looking at 2 payments, one payment in year 1 and another payment in year 2. Many of you, again, in your budget clearly outlined that payment structure, and so there aren't many questions. But again, as I do a final review, if something isn't completely clear or we just want to follow up to clarify, I will be sure to do that. But for the most part, again, you all can expect your first payment in year 1 and then again in year 2. Number 3 here just provides, again, kind of standard contract language. If you do anticipate any significant changes, which we've defined here as a variance of $1,000 or more in your budget, that's something we'll just need to know ahead of time. But otherwise, again, you've all provided more than enough information for us to get started and for us to understand how this money will be used by each of your organizations. Wonderful. These additional requirements, again, for the most part, are pretty straightforward. Confidentiality, I don't think requires much additional explanation. We do ask that you comply with all applicable laws and regulations. So for some of you, that may have implications for licensing or certifications. And so I just want to call that out now. Again, conversations we can continue to have, but we will ask that you comply with the laws of the land. So in terms of lobbying, again, this is just standard contract language for us. If you're familiar with state contracts, this won't be news to you. You can't use our funds to lobby for or against certain things. Again, don't anticipate any issues. Don't want to call that out. We do have a note here that when you're issuing reports, documents, brochures, advertisements, things of that nature, that you do make a note about the origin of these funds and the council support in providing funding for your project. If you have any questions about that, happy to have more conversation. That's definitely something that, on a case-by-case basis may look different for some organizations. So we can have those conversations one-on-one. I do want to note for the ownership piece, E here, that any information related to the deliverables and the scope of work specifically outlined in your contract may be something that we request to review or have a copy of. This is really in line with our FOA requirements, that if needed, we can access documentation as it relates to the Recovery Council's fund and the opioid settlement funds. So that's why that provision is in there. Again, it would be upon the request of the council for you to provide any of that. By no means do we need any of that on a consistent or upfront basis. We just want to call out that in the case of a FOIA request, we may be reaching out to request some additional information. Another aspect here is you all are receiving these funds, and we're expecting that you as the providers will be the ones who are executing on your projects, that you will be assuming full responsibility for all the services that you offer and provide. If you do have sub-agreements, that's something that is allowed, but we would need to know about that up front. again, in your grant applications, you are asked to highlight any sub-agreements, subcontractors, if there is anyone else supporting your your project. So I don't anticipate any issues here, but do want to call that out. And again, on a case-by-case basis, we can sort of refine those details and work through that together. I will just ask if there have been any changes to your project, and you do anticipate any sub-agreements will be in place or having additional contractors involved in the execution of your project. That information we'll need to know sooner rather than later. So let's make sure to have that conversation soon, please. Great. Contract renewals have been a question that some of you have asked. At this point in time, the council is not guaranteeing any funding beyond the 2 years. It's certainly something that we've talked about and future councils may consider. So this contract will not include renewals, but again, more discussions are to come. Let's see. Conflict of interest, again, pretty straightforward. That policy is pretty standard for us as it is of the state and many other contracts. If you think there's any conflict of interest issues, please reach out to me and we can talk through that. Change of operations. If you anticipate any major changes to your project or program, or the status of your operations, we'll need to know that as soon as possible. Please tell us no later than 60 days in advance or prior to any of those changes taking place. Again, we've listed some here: mergers, acquisitions, closings, etc. We will need to have written communication and notice really of just any major changes to your project, and make sure, again, that's not in a verbal communication or in a meeting, but have written information about that so it can be shared with the appropriate parties. Again, that's not new. Just want to make sure it's reiterated. And if there's major changes to your programming or your operations, we'll need to know that as well. Again, don't anticipate anything, but please keep that in mind moving forward, and recognizing, there's a lot going on right now at the state and the federal government. And so if there are changes to other funding sources that impact your project, that's something that we'd like to know sooner rather than later. Great, we can keep scrolling. I want to call out here the background check provision. So what's a little bit different about the council's background check requirements than maybe some other contracts you've seen or been a party to is that we do require background checks, but we do not need to review those background checks, nor will we tell you how to move forward once those background checks are conducted. It is the provider who makes the decision about hiring or moving forward with anybody after that background check has been completed. It's just a requirement that you do have that finished before anyone is hired or provides any work. But otherwise, we recognize that it's up to each provider about how to move forward with that information. Also, in terms of the payment for that, some of you I know in your budget included background checks as one of your staff expenses. If not, right now we are assuming that those costs will be sort of incorporated as part of the indirect rate that you all are subject to and receive. Let's continue to move down. Thank you. All right, and that's all.
Mary, Todd has his hand up.
Yeah, Todd.
Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong button.
No
Mary,
worries.
are we just a silly question? Are we required to use a state reimbursement rate for travel for mileage?
We are. If that's an issue for anyone, again, we can have that conversation. I will say that I've worked closely with the Attorney General's office to pare this down to make sure that we meet the requirements they need to sign off on these contracts. But if there is any flexibility or changes, that's something that is a conversation I've had And as of right now, I don't anticipate we have much much wiggle room in terms of flexibility. Again, on a case-by-case basis, we can discuss that as needed. But these, yeah, contract terms are what are required to ensure that all parties sign off on these contracts. Great. So that was the body of the contract, and I know I mentioned I'll review and kind of walk through that and then open it up for questions. So Katrina, Chastity, you would like to go first. We'll answer council member questions first, and then we can move on to the grantees who are here.
Mine kind of goes more to statement than question. Um, on the background checks, I know we're making people do it, but then after that, we're out of it. I just want to go back on the record to say how much I hate the background check requirement. If it's for licensing, it makes sense to me. Outside of licensing, I don't think that's on an employer to decide what they should or shouldn't do. And especially in this world where we want to see people with lived experience being able to do this work. And a lot of people with lived experience have backgrounds, and whether we force it or not, that's going to come into play and hurt people in ways that it shouldn't. So I just really want to say how much I do not like having that on there.
Thank you, Chastity. Any comments from the council before we open it up to our grantees? Great. All right, with that said.
Mary, I don't know, we may have had this conversation, but I mean, is this something that the council could revisit? I know it's required chastity in all our contracts. I feel the same way, but is there a conversation that could be had again about it, or is that sort of not worthwhile? Just because of our relationship with AG's office and using the formats that belong to the AG's office.
Yeah, Joe, that's a good question. I will note that we have adopted this policy already to give providers the discretion about how to use the information provided in the background checks. But I hear you and I hear Chastity that it's stigmatizing no matter how you slice it to require that. I can go back and ask the Attorney General's office if there is room for us to negotiate that provision. In all honesty, I don't know if there will be. And I also recognize that that topic specifically may result in delays in sort of finalizing and executing some of these contracts. So I'm happy to ask the question, and I certainly will. And I will do what I can to change that or provide clarity, I guess, around any potential changes to that provision. It is a conversation I've had with them on a couple
And I'm with you 100%. I don't think that we want to slow down this round of funding, but I think that the council would benefit from having an overview of this because there are child protection background checks. There's OIG or excluded party lists. There's all kinds of checks that we have to do at TOA, and I think if Brendan maybe could do, again, not tomorrow, but I think it would be very helpful to have the council understand what those look like. And there's costs associated with them too.
Yes.
And they're often annually done. So I think it would be worthwhile down the road to sort of just have an education around that or have some education around that, the background checks.
Most definitely. Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. I think that's an important conversation for us to have. Thank you. All right. I will open it up to the grantees. Katrina, if you can promote folks one at a time to ask questions, I think that would be great.
And could we take down the presentation just so we can see people? Thank you.
Thanks, Grayson. And once you've been promoted, if you could just introduce yourself and your organization, that would be great. And then please feel free to ask your question.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi guys. Sorry, I actually had a thing over my camera. I don't know why. How's everybody
Oh,
doing today?
good, thank you.
Good.
That's
So
the
I just
second time today that happened. That was too funny.
it's
Yeah,
I
we're
have
all
no idea.
slightly technically challenged at times here.
I was like,
Thanks
why
for being
won't my
with us.
camera work? And then I'm looking at it and there's like tape over it. So I'm like, why is there tape over it? But here we are. Thank you guys all for all the wonderful work you do. I really appreciate all of you. And we're grateful to be here today. Just a couple of questions, really piggybacking off of the volunteers. And so the background checks, that's for any and everybody that is involved. So every volunteer, we have the 40 transport volunteers we have across the state for transportation, as well as any volunteers that come in to the call center, or is it just strictly tied to the call center volunteers? Because we have a lot of
That's a
volunteers.
great question.
And we already have, the setup for the, for the volunteers, for the transport, right? We do the license check and things like that that really pertain, insurance registrations, things that pertain to the transport. But so I just wanted to follow up with that. Pat, raise your hand.
I did, it's a standard clause. And then I know that all of the recovery centers have that in there. And you may want to consult with them to see how they go about that. I'm seeing Bob Fickett's name on the participants. I know that Barn has it. I know all the recovery centers have them, and they have a cadre of volunteers. And
Right.
so I would encourage you to probably reach out to them to say how do they handle that provision in the contract.
Perfect. I'll reach out to Bob and Leslie.
And Ryan, I can clarify that the provision includes that the background checks apply to anyone who is providing services under the contract. So if you're not providing direct services, let's say you have an administrative role, then you would not be required to conduct a background check on that person.
So, but the transport, I think that the biggest thing right now is the transport, because we have a number of transport volunteers. And then that will require us to do that background check on 37 or 42 volunteers statewide. So that gets a little, I think it's like up to, what's the cost? $75 per person?
20
to 75. So that puts us out with, but I will address, I'll reach out to Bob and to Leslie to find out kind of if they have a way that they do things that might be easier for us, just to make sure we're checking all the boxes.
Yeah, and if you want to follow up with me directly, we can schedule a meeting with our lawyer to go over that and look at your budget and see if, and see if there's a way in which things don't fall technically under the direct services. So we can see what sort of flexibility we have there. I'm happy to chat about that.
Wonderful. Also, my next question was also to piggyback off of the state allotment for volunteers. It's at 54 cents, I believe. That's the going rate.
Yes, I believe so.
All right. So, and that is, and we've had these conversations already. So there's the federal rate, which is 14 cents, which supersedes, and our understanding, the state rate for our volunteers for transportation anyways, which is really all we reimburse for.
Yeah, so our understanding is that we're still obligated to do the 14 cents. And if we pay any more than 14 cents, that we have to let the volunteer know that anything over 14 cents, they have to claim on their taxes. So that's our understanding. And
yeah, I just want to be sure we have clarity on that. We were previously paying 30 cents and we figured that out by doing math. This is how much gas costs. This is how much cars usually get per gallon, right? So, and not only also looking at that, and we're addressing this in a couple different ways, but like that mandate, 14 cents was put in 1998 and has never been adjusted for COLA at all. So 30 cents is actually 14 cents in 1998. So we're pretty much right on, but it's not, it is not 14 cents anymore. So, so math says that.
Okay. I will get clarity on that with our lawyer and let you know. And again, we can follow up and have that conversation. But that's a
Thank you.
great question and one I
Do you have
can.
anything else, Cynthia?
Nope.
Mm, I think that may be all for the moment. Thank you guys again for all the work you do. I appreciate you all so much.
Of course, likewise. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
While we're waiting on that switch, I just have to say how much I'm chuckling to myself off camera by Ryan saying by doing math. I don't know why that was so great to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think having a conversation with them offline may be sense because again, they do a lot of transportation with volunteers. So we might want to have that conversation offline with him in regards to what we can do to help out with that.
Yeah, most definitely. Any questions I can't answer, I will most definitely follow up with folks. Or if it's a one-on-one kind of case by case basis, we'll schedule time to follow up. Yeah, individually.
We do have Kathy Williams here with some questions.
Great, Kathy,
Or
welcome.
there we go.
Hi, I guess you can't see me here. Hi, I'm Kathy Williams. I'm from the Larry Labonte Recovery Center. I have a question about the publications. I see that, any brochures, that type of thing, you want to have stated that, the Recovery Council is promoting this, that type of thing as funding it. We are in a spot right now where we need to purchase some new brochures for our student recovery program. And so I didn't know, I mean, what do you want on there? Or do you have a logo? Do you have a statement that you want or something? Because we really need to, I don't want to wait till this contract and, have a bunch printed up and then, have to throw them out and whatnot. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Kathy. I will follow up to make sure that I understand clearly exactly what needs to be included. I do know with Recovery Center we're supporting, they've sent some examples of how they're doing that. So I'll review that and then double check with our lawyer about what that language needs to look like, especially given we're just one of multiple funding sources for a lot of folks. So I'll clarify that language and get back to you. And I'll also make sure to relay that information to the full group, as I'm sure other folks will be interested.
Okay, and one other thing, would this need to be on every flyer we put out? I mean, we put out a lot of flyers on social media, that type of thing. Would that need to, or is this just brochures and press releases, that type of thing?
I believe it's just for brochures and press releases, but again, I'll clarify that. Can't imagine we will need our information on every single thing you put out there. Nor do I think I'd want you to do that. So I'll clarify, but I don't believe it. It's to that level of publication.
Great. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you for all the work you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh no, they're
Sorry.
letting Bob Fickett in.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, Bob.
Thank you. I wanted to say first, thank you so much to all of you for the hard work that you've been doing. We're really excited to share with the council the deliverables of this program. We've already seen in the past 2 years the impact that it can have, and we're really growing and developing our justice program. My questions did also have to do with the background checks portion of this. Whereas, you're all supporting an existing program that I have with 2 staff members that are already in place, will you require that I run background checks again? And then share that information with you all with my current staff?
It's a great question. As far, my understanding is that no, if you've run the background checks already, we just want to make sure that's already happened. Again, um, we don't need to see the background checks, nor will we tell you how to move forward. I'll clarify that just to make sure, but if you've already conducted the background checks, you should be good to go.
And that may answer kind of my second part to that question, which was, my understanding of so we currently have department contracts with a similar, and really what the way it is worded, the language in that piece of the contract is that we conduct those background checks and then we share, we confirm with our program administrator a pass or fail, which is within our discretion, as long as there's some certain items detailed within our contracts, neglect or abuse of a child, things like that, that would automatically exclude somebody. But is that similar? Is the council asking that we actually share the documented results of a background check?
Nope.
Or just telling you, hey, they pass our muster
Yep.
kind of thing?
Just telling us you
Okay.
did it, and the rest, we don't need.
Okay. All right. Because we hire people with backgrounds here. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. Um, and then my other question, I don't know how specific this what is to kind of the details of the contract, but maybe you don't have an answer for me, but it's more out of my curiosity because we're operating at risk. Do you have kind of an expected timeline on when would I expect that maybe we're looking at like June? Is this going to fall in line with your typical kind of state contract? When's
Yeah,
my money coming?
it's the $1 million question. First one to ask me that, nor will you be the last. My hope is to get to that at the end and chat a little bit more about sort of our overall process and timeline. But the intention is, yes, to have the funding by June.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I can operate at risk for a while, though I'm not, but of course, I'm always wondering about that.
Yeah, I understand. As should be.
And I think that's all the questions I had. It all looks really boilerplate to me, who's kind of familiar with those types of contracts. So again, thank you all so much for the work you're doing, and for taking my questions.
Of course. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Bob.
Great. Any other questions from folks who are joining us? I don't see any other hands, but I could be missing some. Katrina, do you have anyone else who's queued to speak?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right then. With that said, we'll move on to the Rider B. Again, I'll do the same thing of just providing kind of a brief overview of some of the provisions. Then I'll open it back up to folks to ask questions. So Grayson, when you're ready, if you don't mind pulling that back up, that would be great. Thank you. Just give me a second. All right. Let's see. Number two, again, this is all very boilerplate and standard, so I'll do this quickly and just provide the high level bullet points for you all. The contract administrator right now is positioned to be the MRC coordinator. Just a heads up that may change to be in my hands now as the executive director. It's very likely to change, so that will be updated in the final version. Just want to call that out. But the council staff will still be the contract administrators moving forward. As I mentioned previously, please just let us know about any changes to the work that go outside of what's outlined in your contract. The sooner we know that, the better. If there are changes, in a couple of months, we will require an amendment to the contract, and all parties will have to sign that. So just something to keep in mind now. And again, those are discussions we can have on an ongoing basis and as needed. Again, kind of a different way of saying what I've already stated. If there's any subcontractors or sub-agreements that are taking place within this contract, we will need to know about that. We will need to approve that as well. So again, if that's the case for you all, please let me know and we can move forward with that process. But I want to highlight the last sentence of number 4, that the sub-agreements do not apply to employees. We do not need to sign off on who you hire or who you don't. We'll keep going. Again, subletting, assignment transfer, all pretty standard. You can't contract out or ask anyone else to do the services in your contract. We're providing you the funding to do it. If that changes and you can't, please let us know. But please don't ask other organizations or to do the work for you. Equal employment opportunity, again, pretty standard language. Please don't discriminate when you're hiring or making decisions. Again, goes kind of without saying, but if you have any questions about that, happy to answer, provide further clarity. Number 7, just want to mention briefly, if you employ any current or former member of the council, they cannot be involved in the administration of the contract. And my understanding of that is they cannot be involved in the actual development and writing of it or the decision-making process. Council members who were on the council previously recuse themselves from any vote around awarding funds that may present any conflicts. So we're not worried about that, but just want to state that given, things may change and we don't know exactly who's involved in all of your work. I would just ask that if you do have a current or former member of the council, that they not be involved in the contract administration piece. Again, don't expect any issues, but just want to state that. See, number 9, access to records. Again, I've mentioned this already, that we have this provision in there because of our FOA requirements. Again, make sure you're just updating and maintaining your books, documents, papers, accounting records. If needed, we may ask for copies of those. That will be on a case-by-case basis. And after conversations with our lawyer about what material would be required from you all. So we just ask that you keep those updated and that information available to you in case we do request it at some point in the future. Termination policy, again, that's pretty standard. Let's see if there's anything else. We can keep going. I think that's pretty good. Yep. I do want to call out the insurance requirements. Number 14 may require more one-on-one discussions, depending on the status of your organization and what policies you currently have in place. We do require that all organizations do have some form of liability coverage. That's no less than $400,000, and that's to protect you all, as well as us, the state of Maine, and the Attorney General's office. Again, those discussions are pretty nuanced and will depend on the provider and the situation. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer those, and I'll loop in our lawyer to make sure that we're clarifying any questions you may have and that you have the right insurance policies in place to be in line with this contract. Let's see, thank you. Nothing else here that felt important to call out. Let's see. I think, again, all very standard contract language. Nothing else that I had noted. Those are sort of the big components that I wanted to call out for you all. Any questions from the council or the committee? Seeing no hands, I'll open it up to grantees and the public now to ask any questions about Rider B so far.
As a reminder, I will promote you. You need to accept that so that you can come across to ask your questions. And we have Michelle Chase.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity and all the work that the group is doing for the MRC. Just a question around sub-agreements. Curious if that is more of a blanket term to include sub-awards and vendors or vendor service agreements. Does that encompass both?
That's a great question. I will have to clarify that to be certain, but I believe the sub-agreements is specific to is not specific to the subcontractors. I believe that language was included earlier on in the body of the contract. Let me see if I can get it back up. Do you anticipate any contractors will be supporting your project that weren't highlighted in your application?
Yeah, we have some service providers that were included in the application, but they would not be considered a sub-awardee, just simply a service contract. So we're not serving as a pass-through entity, a sub-award arrangement, and just again wanted to confirm if sub-agreement includes both or one or the other.
Great question, and I will ask for some clarity around that and get back to you. And if there's anything that we would need from you, or there's other providers in advance or of signing the contract, I'll let you know what that would look like. My guess is that would be the case, but I'll confirm and get more information, and then we can have that conversation.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I do not have anybody else queued up, Mary.
Give me a second. Did anyone else from the public have questions or the committee about anything we've discussed so far? Right. Great, well, seeing none. I'm not going to use our time right now to walk through the indirect cost policy. You'll have a copy of that. Again, it's pretty straightforward. If you anticipate any issues with the indirect rate, please let me know and we can have that conversation. But as I mentioned, I'll be reviewing all your budgets to make sure everything's in line. And if you do have an indirect rate, or excuse me, if you have a contract with the state with a different indirect rate than the federal de minimis rate, we'll just need a copy of that and a letter certifying it. But again, I'll reach out to all of you to make sure we obtain that information when we need to. So nothing's needed on your end right now. I think what would be helpful as next steps would be to open it up sort of bigger picture to any other contract related questions you all have. And we can start with the committee first. If there's any points of clarity you want to mention or anything else I've missed, please feel free to jump in. But I want to recognize our timing, and the fact that all these grantees are here is wonderful. So after the committee has a chance to ask any questions, I will open it up to grantees to ask me or us any questions they may have about next steps. Great. All right. See nothing from the committee. Let's see. Is there any other contract related questions from those who are joining us? If so, please feel free to raise your hand. Now is the time to ask. No questions. All right. Katrina, if you see anyone's hands raised, let me know. But I'll provide a little bit more overview then about next steps, just so everyone is aware. What we are working on and what we'll discuss in more detail on Thursday is assigning groups of council members to work on developing the scope of work and those Rider A deliverables for each of these contracts. What we've been able to do with support of the AG's office, your survey results, and then as well with council member support is sort of find groups of council members who have subject matter expertise and or who have already read some of your grant applications. I'll be sharing those groupings with the council on Thursday. And we've looked at trying to assign folks to similar projects so that if we're already working on, let's say, a recovery residence project, we can do multiple at the same time. And part of the intention in doing so is to make sure that when we look at those deliverables, they align with our reporting to make sure that we are requesting similar metrics from all of you so that we can evaluate the impact of these funds further down the line. Our plan, and I have only one PowerPoint presentation that I'll just talk through it. So our focus for February is really going to be on developing, again, those Rider A deliverables in groups. We will use your applications as a starting point, and then as needed, reach out to you to ask any questions or to clarify any aspects of your deliverables or intended use of these funds. If there have been changes to your project and or your budget, again, that information I know many of you are working on. And if you could just please ensure that's provided to me within the next week or two, that would be really helpful. We won't begin working on your project until we have that information. And again, that's really for folks who the total funding that we awarded them is different than the amount they requested. I'd also ask that if there's any changes to your year 1 versus year 2 allocation, please let us know that. Again, we'll be using your grant materials to develop these contracts. So if there's any discrepancies, the sooner we know that, the easier it will be for all of us involved. We'll use the month of March really to begin the contract review process. Again, not for all the contracts, but for many of them. Once we have those deliverables developed, we'll be reaching out to ask any questions. If there are, again, parts of the contract that you all feel you need more clarity around, or parts of the draft that you don't agree with or like to discuss in more detail, we'll have a couple weeks where we'll be engaging in those conversations. One council member will likely take lead in those conversations, and that I'll also be involved just to make sure I have all the information accounted for and we can keep your contract moving forward. What will then happen towards the end of, again, hopefully March or the beginning of April, is we will have a final contract developed. I will note that we have Barry Dunn coming on board to help finalize the contracts. So the council members are really providing the subject matter expertise in developing the language initially, and then we're having Barry Dunn come on to help us refine the language to ensure that the deliverables are both clear and enforceable. Once that final contract is developed, it will be shared with me. I will share it with our lawyer for any final review or changes. And then that contract will be sent out to all of you first and foremost to get your signatures. Once we have your signature, that will be sent to the Maine Recovery Council Chair, Pat Kimball. And then once we have both signatures, it will be sent over to the AG's office for them to have the third and final signature. I just want to note that we don't have much flexibility in terms of the order of the signatures. So you all will be asked to sign the contract first. I will ask you to scan a copy of the signature page as well as send us a hard copy. We will need that hard copy before the AG's office is able to sign off on it. So just that signature process will take a couple of weeks, depending on where things are for each of you individually. And I will work with Pat to make sure we figure out a good schedule and cadence to get those signatures and those documents returned to me so that I can get them over to the Attorney General's office. After that all happens and we have a final contract with 2 out of the 3 signatures on the Attorney General's desk, he will review the contracts and he will provide his third and final signature. From there, the final steps of the contracting process are really in the hands of the Attorney General's office, a couple other state departments, with supervision and support provided by the council. This timeline may, again, adapt and change to some degree, but in general, it will be about 2 months between when that final signature is obtained to the payment of your contract, the first payment of your contract. We have been asked to have the contract start date at least 30 days prior to the contract payment date. There's always the chance your payment will come sooner than that 30 days, but I want to let you all know that in advance so that you can prepare for that. We are working to move as many contracts through this process to have them both finalized and to have payment out by the end of May or early June. Again, I recognize that some organizations are facing some pretty steep funding cliffs. And again, with what's happening in the federal government, there's a lot of question marks and unknowns right now. So we are doing our best to move those forward. And part of, again, the intention of sending out that survey and getting a little bit more information from you all was to understand if this funding was, I know all the funding is urgent, but if you're in a position where you are not able to continue your program operations without the council's funding by a certain date, that was really helpful information for us to know so that we can ensure we move forward with your contract as soon as possible. And then folks who have a little bit more leeway or additional cash flow for an extra month, we could begin working on those after the initial development of those first sort of urgent and priority contracts. We've also been looking at sort of the ease of implementation for some of these contracts, recognizing that current and existing programs that contract will look different than new and startup programs. And so part of my work over this week and last week has been really to identify, which applications may require more involvement, let's say in terms of certification or licensing, and to make sure we're engaging in those conversations as soon as possible. And those contracts, I will take lead on, making sure that I'm working with each of you individually to have questions answered and get everything that we need in place so that, again, when that contract is on the AG's desk for signature, things are good to go and we can continue to move forward. Again, I do want to just reiterate that if your organization has any additional questions or objections to the standard contract terms that I've shared, please reach out to me so we can have that conversation sooner rather than later. As of right now, I do anticipate that any major changes may cause further delay. And in some instances that doesn't pose any problems, but I do know it can. So I want to share that with you all now and be open and honest about that. And again, please reach out to have those conversations sooner rather than later, because once the council is involved in drafting those deliverables, we have everything in place to hopefully move forward as soon as possible and as quickly as possible. The way that I anticipate this process moving forward is we'll have 2 batches of contracts, potentially a 3rd batch if needed, that will be sent to the Attorney General's office within just a couple weeks of each other. I did receive the request just from a workload perspective on their end to help break it up to the extent that we can. So doing 2 groups of contracts will help ensure that they don't have any significant bottlenecks on their side. I do recognize that the council and the Attorney General's office are in partnership with so many of these contracts and with a lot of the work that we do. And many folks on their staff are doing this work above and beyond their additional workload. So I just want to be cognizant of that and make sure that we're doing what we can to help alleviate some of the additional burden that may fall on them in this process. And they are aware of what's happening. We've had ample conversations. So I'm sharing that with you all to make sure we're on the same page moving forward. Bruce.
I don't know if you have more, Mary, but I've asked Grayson and Katrina if they'd be able to, if the committee and the folks here are good with it, with elevating all of these wonderful awardees so that we can see them all kind of in the same room and kind of be thinking how we're working together as a team and moving forward together, if that's okay with everybody.
I love that idea. Perfectly fine by me. Okay. Perhaps we could ask folks to start and go around and just introduce themselves and also their project. I know we've seen this on paper and we've seen our spreadsheet with our grant awards, but we haven't really had an opportunity to all be in the same virtual room and share a little bit about who we are and what we're doing. So if the committee is comfortable with that, I've shared some of the major points I want to convey to you all. So by all means.
Hi, everyone. I'll start it, I guess. I'm Bridget Rauscher. I'm the Director of Public Health for the City of Portland. And our project is a collaboration between Maine Mom, which is a program of Maine Health, and the Portland Fire Department, a project called Mobile Medical Outreach. So it's essentially providing medical care in the outpatient setting to reduce the need for hospitalization and support women or birthing parents who are struggling with substance use disorder. And we are super grateful for the opportunity. And yeah, so thank you. And thank you for all the information today. It was super helpful.
Thanks, Bridget.
Happy to go next. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you tremendously for this opportunity. Teresa Cochran. I am a citizen of Mi'kmaq Nation. I work for Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness, and my role is a Senior Director for the Center for Healing and Recovery. And this partnership and funding opportunity will help us sustain and maintain our detox center and our MAT programming in the services that we're doing in our small facility in Bangor. We have a 10-bed facility, and this will be instrumental in allowing us to continue this amazing work. So thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Nice to meet you. Kathy.
Hi, I did introduce myself briefly when I asked my question, but again, I'm Kathy Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the Larry Labonte Recovery Center in Rumford. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and this funding means the world to us because we would probably be closing without it. And, you know, the work we're doing Particularly in the schools. We started a student recovery coach program, and we're currently meeting with 28 students per week. And it's very important to us, and I think that this is our 5th year, and to be able to make it past that mark is wonderful. They say the first 5 years is the hardest, and it hasn't been easy, but I really want to thank you all for this, and it's absolutely incredible, and it's going to be wonderful to be part of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Appreciate all that you're doing.
I'm Bob Fickett. I'm the Executive Director of the Bangor Area Recovery Network, and thank you so much. The council is supporting our Recovery Justice Program, which we piloted over the past 2 years, and we're just excited to continue developing. It works with bringing programming into regional and statewide facilities, recovery programming, and making connections with folks who are incarcerated, re-entering into society, or have ongoing engagement in the legal system, integrating them with our community-based services and things such as recovery coaching, and also facilitating the state of Maine's only prosecutorial diversion program in collaboration with the Penobscot County DA's office. So we're really excited about this, and thank you.
Bob, good to hear a little bit more about what you all are doing.
I can jump in. Can you hear me? Margot Walsh from MaineWorks. Hi, everybody. I just want to say thanks again, of course, for all of this work. I actually spent the day at Maine State Prison today, where what Bob was just saying resonates so profoundly, that there are a lot of people coming out who are going to need incredible support, which they do, and the community of this group has already been doing some fantastic work there. Our grant funding is to open locations in both Augusta and Bangor during this year to expand MaineWorks operations throughout the state. So thank you. But I also just wanted to mention, Mary, your patience and capability in this function has been extraordinary. And I can't believe what you've been bombarded with. And everyone else on the council has been so responsive and fantastic. But Mary, literally, if you deal with the minutia that you deal with us on with everybody else, I don't know how you're doing it, but thank you all. Thanks.
Thanks, Margot. I appreciate that. Those are very kind words. Catherine.
Just want to echo everybody's thanks and appreciation. This is amazing work that you're supporting, and I love the process. So really, really grateful. We are continuing a program through the Maine Recovery Council that we started with HRSA funds. That attracts people with lived experience of substance use and other mental health concerns into the field of behavioral health. So we connect them with mentors and get them laptops and help ease any of the barriers that are confronting people as they try to do this work. So people that are interested in and have a real heart and some experiences and skills for this work can kind of get a leg up through our program. So we're really excited to continue it, and we're also developing a youth version of our Recovery Jobs for Beginners through this project. So we're really, really excited to get some youth involved in this as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. And exciting to hear about the new project you all have coming up.
Other folks that want to check in, Ron, Allie, Teresa.
Sure, Bruce. Thanks for calling on me. Good afternoon, everyone. Ron Springle. I'm with Maine Association of Recovery Residences. We inspect and certify 92 houses with 1,130 beds in 11 counties. That means there's 5 counties that really have nothing. Probably no uncertified houses, although they tend to work underground. We're thrilled, for Danielle's project in Fort Kent, but our project, the Rural Recovery Residence Expansion Program, is designed to identify 8 community providers in some of these underserved or unserved areas and help them through the first year of operations for a rural recovery residence. Men, women, special populations, it doesn't matter. So we'll be soliciting very soon from everyone we can think of. For any small groups, nonprofits, even just a few folks hanging around at the new community center, having coffee, saying, "Gee, we should really get a recovery residence in our town." Those are the people that we want to identify and help to empower them.
Thanks, Ron. And I owe you an email, I think, about a couple ideas I have from folks who didn't receive funding who I'd love to share their names and project ideas with you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Wonderful.
I'll go next. I am Danielle that Ron just mentioned. I started a nonprofit in the fall of 23 in memory of my son that passed away from an accidental overdose. We started a recovery center up here in Fort Kent, and the Recovery Council's funds is going to help us with a recovery residence in Fort Kent. So excited but anxious and nervous for all of that. And yeah, I thank you all for all the hard work that you guys are doing, and looking forward to getting to know more people and working with Ron, of course. Kathy Williams, you had mentioned something about coaching in the schools, and I wrote that down. So I don't know if I can get your contact information, just because we kind of want to do that with our recovery center as well. There are some individuals that did the coaching for youth, the Recovery Coach Academy. So I would appreciate being able to connect with you, Kathy, if you're still on here. But
Yes,
yeah,
I'll put my email and phone number in the chat.
thank you.
So I can go next, if that's okay. So I am Teresa Dow. I'm a program coordinator at the Everett County Action Program. And we are hoping to sort of lead a stronger presence within the school systems in Northern Maine, hoping to be able to get in to provide Narcan training to high school students and students that are wanting to learn how to administer it to save a life of a friend or a family member who may be in active addiction. We're really hoping to broaden our reach as well around safe medication disposal, as well as storage. So really looking to have a strong presence at community events and within the local school systems to talk about the importance of that. One of the statements that I think I saw on the DHS, they have the brief digital ones, and it's talking about medication and sharing isn't caring. And that always sticks with me now, how that's changed over time. So really wanting to have a stronger presence with our youth here in Aroostook County to hopefully change the trajectory as they move forward.
Thanks, Teresa.
My name is Allie Lovejoy. I'm here from Preble Street, and we have seen a lot of use among people experiencing homelessness, people experiencing homelessness either in sheltered or unsheltered homelessness, and MRC funding would allow us to make sure that folks have access to safe shelter, make sure that the shelter staff are equipped to be able to respond immediately to overdoses and help people get connected to more stability and recovery resources. And that would be at our Helena's Way shelter in Portland, which specifically serves people who've been sleeping outside, our Florence House shelter for women in Portland, and our Hope House shelter for homeless folks in Bangor.
Thank you, Ellie, and for all the work you do and the people you support.
Hi, I can go if that's okay. I've been off camera because I've been driving, but I pulled over. I'm Elizabeth Simone. I work at Maine Pretrial Services, and I also want to echo many thanks. Mary, you have been the epitome of grace and patience, and so informative. This is a really nice opportunity for us all to learn more about your process, and I appreciate the transparency and the helpfulness. Maine Pretrial Services really focuses on release for people who are incarcerated, but we also do case management in Maine's treatment and recovery courts. And we have two projects that we are so grateful to receive funding for. They are smaller scale financially, but really, really important to us because we don't have funding sources to give, number one, incentives to people in our programs. The research is really clear that when people are moving through early recovery in the carceral system, they benefit from having 10 positives to every negative. And I think we all know and appreciate how difficult the carceral and court system can be in early recovery or at any time for someone. So the Recovery Council is helping us give tangible incentives to people. And we're really happy because we are going to have 3 graduates from Maine's treatment courts be compensated for advising us on how we use those funds as part of our project. And then the second project is a little bit bigger. It is to provide barrier removal. We don't have any funding to help people when there are gaps. So things like medication and transportation, or when things just aren't going right and there is no provision of service for people, the Recovery Council is helping us deliver things in real time to people so that we can hopefully enhance their success. So thank you. And thank you to all the providers on this call. What an amazing group of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for all you just said. I really appreciate it. Would anyone else like to join in and share a little bit more about their project? Okay, so we have a couple folks who are still attendees. If anyone wants to join in, please raise your hand and feel free to do so. Wonderful. I think otherwise that it kind of wraps up a majority of our grant contract conversation. Again, if there's any questions that come up over the course of this contracting process or after today, you all have my email. Please feel free to reach out. I also wanted to say that I recognize how difficult this has been for many of you, and I know the urgency in getting these funds out, and I think there is a point where we can almost do more harm than we mean to if we don't get these funds to the people who we promised them to. And so I just want to reiterate that we're going to do everything we can to get these contracts out. I think we all want to be on the other side of it, and we're still at the very beginning, but our commitment is there, and the council is we're all focused on getting these completed, and are supporting one another so that we can support you. And I just want to encourage you all to reach out and let us know what we can do over the next couple of months to continue to support you. The needs are great right now. And again, there's so much that's unknown and scary that's happening and will unfortunately continue to happen. So I just want to say that please tell us what you need. And we will do everything we can to help in some way, shape, or form, even if that's just a conversation with myself or one of the members of this council. I think our work can go far beyond just providing funding to you all. And it's been really helpful to see you all put faces and names together, and just hear about your projects, because there is a lot of collaboration and opportunities for collaboration that I think the future still holds, and ways in which we can all continue to support each other. We're on the same team and we want the same thing. And so any part of this process that can be collaborative and supportive, I'm all in favor for, and I know the council is as well. So please stay in touch, stay open, and we'll do the same. And again, we'll get this money out the door sooner rather than later. So thank you all for your patience, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you,
Mary.
everybody.
Thanks for
Thank
leadership.
you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Great work,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
And I know we still have about 15 minutes, and I'm glad we have some time with Gordon now on the call to talk a little bit more about the urgent funding request before we wrap up. You're on mute still, Gordon. Oh.
Couldn't disappear.
He's still on. We
Oh,
just
there he
can't
is.
see him. Gordon, while you do that, one other quick note about scheduling. So I've heard back from all the committee chairs about the cadence of our committee schedules moving forward. And I've mentioned this before, but want to reiterate it, that it would be really helpful if we could move to sort of a set meeting schedule that doesn't operate on an every other week basis. But I'm hoping we can do the first Tuesday of every month and then the third Tuesday of every month. Again, with the council meeting, it's just way easier from a workload perspective, and also to make sure we're spreading out the time that we're together to ensure we're moving our projects forward. And looking at the calendar right now, we're scheduled to meet on the 25th. I'm wondering if now would be a good time for us to make that pivot and change to the first and third schedule, which would mean not meeting until March 4th. Want to just throw that out there, and Joe, your decision completely. But before we get too far into the every other week schedule, I just want to mention it.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine with that. I think probably people are curious around kind of our roles, and I think, Mary, if we can talk about, because we also need to have Grayson post our meeting, so that could be fine. I think if we could talk about kind of what will we be doing at the next meeting, so we can get that agenda to Grayson, I think that would be great, even though we have a bit longer if we don't meet.
Okay.
But I open it to the council or the committee members too. Does that work for folks?
If that does, part of my reason for thinking now is a good time to make the transition is, many of you will be involved in helping develop these contracts. And so I think we'll be working together and doing work anyway outside of a committee meeting. And so I think honestly that 3-week time would be good for us to all have. And then in 3 weeks, we can convene again, see where things are, and then figure out next steps as a committee.
Especially since we're going to be having a pretty in-depth conversation at the full council meeting next week.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So Grayson, Mary, Joey just sent, oh, we have time now, so we can get you Grayson.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It was that you can ignore my email. What was the date that you said would be you said first and third Tuesday, but I didn't hear what the date of that was.
So the first Tuesday of March is the 4th, and we'll do the same 3 to 5 p.m. The third Tuesday of March is the 18th. But we'll have 3 weeks now between that, when we formally meet again. But
perfect.
The work won't stop.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Gordon, all you.
Okay, can I ask, you can hear me?
Yes.
Can can I ask that 20 minutes that I was trying to get into the meeting, did you deal with the low barrier shelters at all?
We certainly did. We reviewed the responses to their questions, and then we also had them briefly join us and just talk a little bit more about their projects. So the recommendation is now to move that to the full council for a final vote on Thursday.
Was that a unanimous recommendation on the low barrier shelter?
Yes.
Yes.
I believe so.
Good. Okay. I would have added my vote to that. Thank you. On the question of my draft, I'm assuming, Mary, that didn't come up before because when I couldn't get on. So Mary and I have talked about the draft of the urgent needs that deals with only the projects that have already, that are already scored, that have an above average score, and that more information has been shared with the council to declare that they're urgent, and you can see what those two provisions are. Now, in the meantime, I also drafted a second urgent needs policy for anything that comes in that's not already been presented to the council. Mary and I have talked about that. I have talked with the leadership about it. We're not going to take that up anytime soon. We're not going to take it up Thursday. We've got enough to deal with, and there's a lot to think about there. So this is what I consider pretty limited in that these would only apply to, again, projects that were submitted that are sitting there in one of the four tiers. Now, we had an earlier conversation, Mary and I, and she's got some ideas about some changes to this that she would be more comfortable with in terms of the precedent. And I'm fine with those, so long as they wouldn't include us Thursday from considering the request of the Recovery High School, however that might go. And I realize we cannot consider that application unless we proceed that with a favorable vote on this kind of a policy. So, Mary, I'm going to turn it back to you. We got 10 minutes, probably time enough for you to share with them what you and I talked about at our 1 o'clock call, because I think they're all good suggestions, and I would endorse them.
Thanks, Gordon. And please feel free to jump in if I miss anything. 1 o'clock feels like a lifetime ago right now.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So what I shared with Gordon after reviewing this draft again was a couple of thoughts and why I have reservations about moving forward with the policy as it's currently drafted. And here's why. As I've been reviewing the evaluations and looking back over the scores, I do think there is a need for us to at least consider or reconsider some of the applications that did not receive funding. And part of that is because I recognize the council was really involved in both the evaluation process and the decision making, but we also had external evaluators. And this is the first time we've ever done this. So there are certain aspects of the process that I think we have, we should at least review again, I guess, kind of for lack of a better way of phrasing that. There are a handful of applications where there's quite significant variance between the scores. And because we only had 3 folks reviewing these applications, we weren't in a position to, take the highest and lowest score and eliminate those and then take the average. We really took all of these scores at face value. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I just think now that some time has passed, there are certain applications that we sort of owe these applicants at least just a discussion about. And I know that there are certain applications council members are really passionate about. And I also want folks to have that opportunity to share why and advocate for funding some of these projects in the future. And And so what I would suggest is that we look at this policy and incorporate the variance of the final scores as well as the average score. So the average score for our grants is around 84. And the first line here talks about, council members petitioning for applications that scored above that. I'd also like to include, in addition to scoring above the average score, applications that had a variance of 20 or greater. So if there was a score differential of 20 or more points, we at least give those applications another review. It doesn't mean we fund them. It just means we reconsider them. Part of another reason why I think that's important is the funding landscape has changed. And I also think a lot of the applications where there was more variance were for the smaller organizations who didn't have grant writers and who were up against far more than I think they anticipated in completing these applications. And I think there's an opportunity here for us to look at some of these applications and, talk to the counties, speak to other funders about potentially providing support if we think that's the best path forward. Again, I really feel strongly about the fact that the council has money to provide and we can be a funding source for the next 16 years or however long. But there's a lot more that we can do as an organization that goes well beyond just funding and connecting people to other funding sources, helping provide maybe some technical assistance, or looking at the smaller grants is something that we have an obligation to do instead of, again, just saying no to folks. Providing some sort of support moving forward. And again, that doesn't have to be funding, but I do think it's a discussion and a consideration. And after the time and effort people put into these applications, that could be one path forward for us. Again, I also think we need to get these contracts out and we need to have conversations with the finance committee and with the full council about how much funding we actually have. And I don't want to see us in a position where, we have a handful of folks come forward and talk to council members and then advocate for funding. And then we run through all the sort of additional funding we have available. I think it'd be important for us to know how much we have and have more intentional conversations. And potentially the Program and Grants Committee could do that, over the course of a couple meetings. And we can look at the applications that have been selected. We can set a due date essentially, and then have those discussions where conversation isn't rushed. And again, we can look at those scores in more detail.
Mary, just a quick question if I could. Did you mean scoring above average and or just and?
And or, I think.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, looking at, again, either one of those as being criteria for reconsideration. I love the idea of a council member sort of being an advocate for why this application deserves reconsideration. But also having folks who actually scored the application be present and provide some explanation as to, why they scored high or why they scored low. And I know it's pretty standard practice for a lot of boards who provide funding like we do. And I think it's something that we would be smart to think about as a process moving forward. Again, it doesn't mean we'll fund you. It doesn't tie our hands or obligate us to do really anything. It just says, hey, here's the things we're going to do to have a further conversation about your project and ways we can support you.
Mary, did you have an opportunity, and I can't believe that you have, but we had discussed, I'm interested in if it's higher than average score and or a variance of more than 20, how many applications do we have that would meet either of those categories?
I did briefly look through it. I've closed the document and I won't be able to find it quickly. Most of the applications with a variance of 20 or more were in tier 5.
I see. Okay. So would you say there's 15 or 20? I mean, just off the top of your head, if you're talking about 20, or are we talking about 10?
We're talking about probably around 25 would be my guess.
Okay. That's and I think we had talked about, using the word reconsideration somewhere in this policy, and there should be a limit on the time period. Whether that's 3 minutes, 1 month after being notified of the decision not to fund their project, or 3 months. I mean, I think because we did this in November, I think initially it's going to have to be longer than maybe it should be in the future. But are you comfortable with those two changes as well?
Yes.
Well, we've got 3 minutes, and so
I found the document. It's closer to like 50 applications. I'm so sorry. It's quite a
that would actually fit this reconsideration model.
Mm-hmm. And again, a majority of those don't fit the above average score, but they do fit the 20 or more variance score.
That's a lot.
Ton.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Well, what I would suggest at this point in the call is that Mary and I work on this a little more, on this policy, and try to narrow that some. Maybe the variance should be less, 15. Maybe it should be, and maybe you should have to reach both thresholds. Maybe it should be, above average score and a variance greater than 20. So let's play with that. We're not going to be able to figure it out here in the next 2 minutes, and yet I really hope that you'll give us time Thursday to consider what we come up with between now and Thursday. It won't be a lot different than what's in front of you. A couple little adjustments, because if we can't, then I can't. I am fine, as I told Mary. I really would like to have us consider the Recovery High School. I've asked Aaron, the Attorney General, to do it, but he hasn't given me a commitment that he would. And I realize that we may not get, even if we adopt this policy, then we may, in applying the Recovery High School, we may not get a 3/5 vote. But I'd sure like to throw it out there on Thursday. If we don't, then we don't. I'm not going to, I'm an adult. I can deal with it. So that's what I would suggest. Give us a little more time on this policy, and let us bring it back on Thursday.
I just might suggest that it not be above and, because I think if you're above 84 and you don't have a high variance, it means there was an agreement that you were above average. If you have a score of 84, but somebody gave you a 60, and somebody gave you a 98, I don't know. I guess I don't know that keep working on it. I guess I would say I might not be down. I just don't know that that's going to give you what you're looking for, but I'm sure you all will figure it out.
We'll try. We'll play with that, Liz, and we'll keep you posted on it, and give it a shot. We may not make it by Thursday, but let us try.
So I just want to say that I'm in agreement with this policy moving forward. I like Mary's changes that she's suggesting and tweaking it. I just want to keep reminding people to keep their eye on the prize. And that is, the priority really needs to be the now 45 agencies that we have agreed to give money to and need contracts for. And so that work, I believe the council is saying how important that is, and we're rolling quickly. But we need to, again, remember at all times, the focus needs to be on getting that money to again, it's now 45. If we include the two shelters, if the full council approves that. So again, I like the direction this is going in. It certainly allows for agencies that wrote good grants that somehow fell between the the gaps in the way we do things. But again, I just want to remind people, keep your eye on that, getting those contracts out.
And Pat, it's not 45 because we have 7 from last year that are not done.
We do.
That's 52, and those should really be the first one.
Those
So
should be the
it's a daunting task. I acknowledge that.
Mhm. Yes. All right, Gordon, we can chat tomorrow. And I'll look back through the spreadsheet and see if I have any thoughts. And we can go from there. But I appreciate everyone's input and thoughts.
Me too.
And Mary, I just want to say it was so refreshing to hear people get on there despite all of the delays and all of the stuff going on, that you evidently do it in a way that is so respectful to the people, patiently waiting for contracts and funding, to hear how well and professional you represent this council. And I can't say how much I appreciate that.
Thank you, Pat.
Aye.
They were all very kind, I will say. That was nice to hear and reassuring, that we're moving in the right direction. And I appreciate it. All the support. So thank you all. Also for being great people to work with. You make my job, for the most part, easier. There's some days it's a little bit more difficult, I will say. But overall, working with a good group of people makes all the difference. So thank you all.
Well, today was great. It was great to see people, hear from them. So really great meeting. So we will be meeting now on March 2nd, and we'll get that out to folks. And then we will see you all 2 days from now.
March 4th. We don't want to meet on a Sunday.
March 4th, sorry.
Yes.
And Chastity, our dear friend, did minutes from the last meeting, which we'll get out to people. I apologize. And she was taking meeting minutes today, and she's fabulous. So thank you for that. And we'll get out the meeting minutes from last time.
Perfect. See you all on Thursday, virtually.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.